Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, and welcome to Big Mech's Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge, and as you can see here we've got something a little bit different today because we're working on characters for a while. This is the Sea Hag from Guild Ball for the Fisherman's team. What's the company that makes these? Steamforge. They really do pack in a lot of detail into such a small miniature, as you'll see when we start picking all that out. But it's a lovely sculpt, and now primed in black, I'm primed her black. I'm going to start with Cantor Blue by Games Workshop. There's going to be a lot of wet palette work in here, so the video is longer than usual, so I apologise for that. The reason for that is that it just takes longer to see the result of the paint being added, so it means longer bits of footage, guys. The next colour is Camouflage Green by Game Colour, which is more of a yellow colour than it is a green. Again, this is really watered down. You can see the black seeping through the cloak there, so that's going to take a couple of really watered down coats to build that up because we're painting straight onto the black prime. But what we're really doing at the moment is just blocking in those first base colours. Now that's got a nice even coat, we're going to use Collier Green Shade by Games Workshop. I probably did add a small amount of Lamiate Medium to this, just to stay in control of it and stop it drying all patchy. Doesn't matter at this point if your brush goes over onto any of the other parts like the Cantor Blue that we just did. Just trying to make sure this sits in all those recesses and tints the cloak ever so slightly green. Now we're back to the Camouflage Green by Game Colour, and this is one of those bits of footage that I've had to really speed up because there's barely any paint at all on this brush. And we're going to start painting over the highlights and then pulling the paint from the recessed areas to the highlight area, leaving the majority of the paint on those high areas. Now once you've rinsed and repeated that lots and lots of times, taking lots of your time, you'll get a result like this. After that, we're using Camouflage Green mixed with Ogre and Camo. It's a 50-50 mix. And again, it's watered down, because once you water it down and use these glazing techniques like we did in the Noxious Blightbringer, you get a much smoother transition, and that's really important to have when you're doing cloaks and anything that has movement attached to it. Cloaks, hair, stuff like that. And because the paint's watered down so much, you can go over your shaded areas and then pull it away and it still blends nicely. After that we're going straight to just using Ogre and Camo by Games Workshop. Going over those areas again and really starting to pick up the shape of the cloak now. As you can imagine, this is really time consuming. Now we're going to start blocking in the starfish colours using Morning Fang Brown by Games Workshop. That's watered down, but you don't need to water it down too much because you don't want to lose control and have it spill onto the cloak work that you just spent like 2 to 3 hours doing. Even if you did, you can just water down your other paints again and start glazing over it and it'll blend it out. Once those starfish are done, I decided I was going to start blocking in some more colours and did the fish on the back so we can see those with Gunmetal by Game Colour. You could use Lead Belcher if you wanted to, or even a chrome or any other colours. They're just going to get washed down later on. I find that blocking in the colours does help the camera focus a bit more, so I'll probably be doing that technique quite a bit more often. Now we're using Green Grey by Model Colour to do all the barnacles and whatnot. We're not going to town on these barnacles. There's a lot of them at the moment. We're just blocking them in with this colour. There's a few on the cloak and quite a few on the back. And at this point I hadn't quite decided what colours I'm doing everything else, so I'm taking my time with watered down paints. Now it's going to be Collier Green Shade and Lamiate Medium to go over all the barnacles. That's just going to make a harder line around where the barnacle joins with the cloak. so it matches the same sort of shading technique as the rest of the cloak and doesn't stand out like a little bright coloured blobs. So that's what you really do want it to pull around that area a little bit. Next I started picking up started picking out the rest of the starfish with a XV88 by Games Workshop. This is more of an edge highlight than anything else really, which is quite easy to do because they're very well pronounced on this fig. So just edge highlighting those and bringing most of the paint to the very centre because that's where the most light's going to hit. Now I decided to do the ripped up trousers that she's wearing in a Steel Legion drab by Games Workshop. Just be careful not to hit any of those blues, but at this point we've not really done any shades or highlights on them yet, so it's not too important. But it's a good idea at this point to locate the rips in the trousers and start to get a better feel for the model. After that I started highlighting them with a Baneblade Brown. I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7 here because quite a small scale I'm working on and I wanted a bit more control. Mainly highlighting the fronts of the trousers, so when we put a wash on it filters better and looks like the light's hitting the front. Now we're using Lactic Blue by Games Workshop and applying the same glazing techniques that we did with the cloak. So again, this is going to take a lot of time, but this colour is going to cover most of the horrible Cantor blue that went slightly glossy for some reason. I think it's just because it's off Andy's desk. Anything on Andy's desk ends up glossy. Now we're going to mix Lactic Blue with Rust Grey, both Games Workshop colours, water it down in the wet palette and start blending those. Picking out the tops of the arms, the knees, just all the highlight areas. There's going to be a few more layers of blue on this. I really wanted to make her go grey, but just didn't end up getting the colour combination right that I wanted. I could have made it go blue to grey a bit more if I wanted, but didn't end up doing that. Again, we're just adding more rust grey into the mix and picking that up. Working on those calf muscles and everything else. Like I tell you in the other videos, guys, just keep your paints really watered down, then when you make a mistake you can just filter over it. Now to bring all those together, we're going to use Colia Green Shade with a Lamiate Medium mix again. And what that'll do is all those blends that you've done, it will act as a filter and make them look more together, and any hard lines will disappear. Now for the hair, I decided to go for something a bit more random. I decided to go for a Sick Green by Game Colour, but you could use Strachan Green if you wanted by Games Workshop, or one of their other lighter greens like Warboss Flesh. There's a lot of details in the hair, so you want to really keep this paint watered down and be careful at this point because you've done quite a lot of blending. After that, we're going to add a little bit of Warpstone Glow into the Strachan Green, which was a very weird combination. But I'm trying to make the tops of the hair now, just running it like an edge highlight and trying to make the tops a little bit more paler than the rest of it, rather than bright, because if I went to go bright here, it would end up with a Necron Warpstone Glow sort of hair, and that's not really what we're going for. I like to mute my colours where the light's hitting. After that, we're just going to add even more Strachan Green into the mix and go over them again, but this time only over the raised bits. How to describe that? The raised bits that are flowing around more where the light would hit most, so you don't want to cover the whole lot that you've just done. The top of the head's a prime example of where the light will hit the most, so pull your paint up in that direction. Then we're just going to do Strachan Green on its own, which as you can tell is starting to add a tint of a yellowier green over the top of the other one. Really breaks up the massive clump of green hair and starts making each bit look a bit more individual, like an individual strand of hair. Now for the jewellery, I decided to go for bright bronze by Game Colour, but you could use any of the Games Workshop metallic paints if that's what you've got available to you. And we're going to wash these in a bit as well to make them match the colour scheme. I wanted it to look like rusted brass or some piece of random metal you'd find on the beach, which is where most of this colour scheme came from. Just looking at seaside resorts and old ships and stuff, just trying to figure out what would match best. Then Collier Green Shade really watered down with a Lamiate Medium, and we're going to give this 2 or 3 coats. I'm going to start mainly at the top of the head and then pull most of the wash downwards and behind the hair, so when it sets it darkens more there, and doing that in a few coats will make that transition nice and smooth. You do want it to sit in the recesses, but you've still got to build that up. Now this was a recommendation by Andy to use red leather by Model Colour, which is a colour I've not used before, because there's a backpack on her back and I wasn't quite sure what kind of colour to go with, but it does sort of complement the starfish, and when it's done it also looks like a very weathered old leather, so it actually came out pretty well as a colour. That's a red leather by Model Colour. Now I'm going to start on the skull while that's drying, and I'm going to use XV88 by Games Workshop. As you can see, the more we get into this video, the more the camera can focus because the details have been picked out. And it's just one of those models, the more you paint it, the more you find little details that you've missed. Now this is Hammered Copper by Game Colour, which is, after using it, is a colour I might like using quite a bit more. It definitely has potential to go on quite a lot of different things. It's a very red metallic colour. But it just sort of reminded me of more of the random bits of ship junk that you find at the sea. So I thought that would be a good colour scheme to use. Now we're going to use Fenrisian Grey, Administerium Grey and a tiny blob of Collier Green Shade to make a more grey bluish tone, because we didn't have anything else that wasn't too bright. I'm going to start highlighting the cheekbones, the lips, the chin. Basically same as we wet blended everything else together and glazed. Now back to the backpack, because I'm jumping back and forth here while I'm waiting for paint to dry. This is Dark Tone by Army Painter, which is basically Army Painter's version of Null Oil, although I do think it's quite a bit darker. At least when it sets anyway. It looks about the same now, but when it sets it really does darken things down. Then I went ahead and used a Sepia Shade by Game Colour, and that's another wash or an ink, to go over the Hammered Copper. And that really does give that a very weathered sort of worn look. But as you can see, the more bits we do on here, the more the model starts to pop and stand out. It's just a matter of taking your time and playing around with your colours. Now as usual, after doing the other colours on the skull, it's going to be Xandri Dust again by Games Workshop, because we use a colour, wash the colour, re-highlight it with the same colour, and possibly wash it again and tone it all down. It's basically the gist of painting any of these models, guys. And then we're going to give that an Agrax to the shade wash, and of course later on we're going to re-highlight that back up. And I'm also going to give the backpack a wash with Agrax as well. No particular reason, I just thought, yeah, let's darken that down a bit more. And now it's like, now we're going to do exactly what I said, and we're going to use the red leather, the same colour we had to start off with, watered down, to start highlighting the edges and the buckle straps and everything else on the backpack. And because it's got the same underneath colour, the highlights just look natural now. And then lead belcher was used on the buckles to pick those out, because I didn't want to put any more extra copper on those bits, because I noticed the copper and the backpack are a very similar colour right now. So I didn't want to make the back of the model too similar in any way, because we needed to break up all the bits of junk she's got on her back. Also doing the harpoons and spears in the same colour. And of course we're going back to Zandri dust to start picking out the forehead, the nose bone and the eyebrows of the skull. It has a lot of ropes going through its face and around the rest of the model, but we're going to pick those out later. So it doesn't matter if you get paint on those at the moment. Now for the spears and harpoons and whatnot, we're using Game Colour Extra Opaque Heavy Brown, but if you don't have that, you can use Games Workshop Steel Legion Drab. It's a very similar colour, but if you use the Game Colour one, it's extra opaque, so you want to water that down because it can go on quite thick. Then we're going to use the Game Colour Wash Sepia shade again, and I really like the result of that. It made the entire stick part look very, very weathered, and really matched the rest of the model. Now there's a few other bits and pieces on the backpack which I'm not 100% sure what they are, but they look like catching jars or something, or they'd have glass in them. So I started with the Caliban green on those. It just seemed like the right colour for them and they'd fit. If you know what those things are called, leave a comment and let us know. Now we're going to mix Caliban green with a tiny bit of ochre and camo. Usually you've seen me highlight using Rakkar Flesh, but ochre and camo is already a part of this palette, so I didn't find it necessary to venture too far away from what we're already using. Basically making a ball, or making the sphere look like the light's hitting a particular part of it. Then after that's dried, we're going to add even more ochre and camo and make that little ball that we're lightening up even smaller and just go into the centre of it. Almost the same way you do OSL, but we're keeping our colours muted and subtle because it's just light reflecting back, it's not light coming out of it. Then to add even more depth to the rest of that, we're going to use Baltan Green by Games Workshop. Just be careful you don't put too much on here because it can spill onto the yellows and blues that we've done, and that'll ruin what you've got. And as you can see, once you put that down, the strings and bits become very pronounced because of the extra shade. Now this is another colour that I nicked off Andy's shelf. It's Armantha Red by Model Colour. I've not used it before. It's sort of an orangey, peachy red. But you know, when you're at the coast and you see fish nets and other random stuff, they ever come in like greens or oranges, and since there's so much green on this model already, I decided to edge highlight all the strings with this colour. Then while that's drying, I've gone back to the spears on the back and we're using the heavy brown again just to re-highlight the notches and other random parts on it. As you can see, I went around the skull as well with the same Armantha Red, which really starts bringing that out, and it looks like everything's tied to her back. She sort of reminds me of the old hag from Labyrinth, actually, if anyone's ever seen that. Then Baneblade Brown was used for the bandana. And at this point, anything else that needs to be done, because this video is so long, is just take your base colour that you started with before the washes and highlights, and if you want to take it any further, You just water it down and you re-highlight that now, guys. So at this point I've covered almost the entire colour scheme. Then obviously this is going to be Agrax First Shade Wash, then back to the Baneblade Brown, and just rinse and repeat. Maybe take it up to the Carrick Stone after that to add extra highlights. And there you go, guys. That's one hag painted up and ready for Andy's Fisherman Army. We don't have the rules for Guild Ball at the moment, otherwise we'd possibly bring you some reports for those. And I hope that helps you with your figs. Let us know if you like the Guild Ball tutorials, because we do like to know what our audience like to see. If you haven't hit like yet, hit that like, hit subscribe, because we've always got more footage coming out, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.